The storm had swallowed downtown Chicago in silver rain when Sarah Williams balanced a tray through the glowing hush of the Golden Rose, a restaurant where million-dollar deals whispered louder than music. At table 12, billionaire David Harrison scrolled his phone while his glamorous girlfriend, Victoria Sterling, smiled at someone across the bar, a stranger who lifted his glass like a secret signal. Sarah froze. One glance too many. One truth no one else dared to see. Her pulse hammered as Victoria snapped, "Do your job and disappear." She leaned closer to David, voice trembling but steady. "Sir, you might want to look up." In that instant, the room's perfection cracked, and Sarah's life began to unravel. What happens next will change everything. Like the video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales for stories where one choice can rewrite an entire life. Rain still whispered against the tall glass panels of the Golden Rose as every sound in the dining room seemed to freeze after Sarah's words. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The billionaire slowly lifted his eyes from the glowing screen in his hand and looked up at the server who had dared to interrupt him. David Harrison's voice came out calm, almost too calm. "What should I look at?" Sarah's throat tightened, but she met his gaze. "Your girlfriend," she said quietly. "She's been texting the man at the bar since you arrived." The air changed. Silverware paused mid-air. Conversations faltered. Victoria Sterling, flawless in her white silk dress, blinked once before her expression hardened. She gave a small, practiced laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. "Why would I text anyone?" "David, don't listen to her. She's clearly mistaken." David turned his head slowly, his gaze following the invisible line from Victoria to the man in the blue suit. The stranger was pretending to scroll his phone, but his reflection in the wine glass betrayed him. His smirk lingered. "Victoria," David said softly, "give me your phone." Her hand froze above the table. "Excuse me." "Your phone," he repeated. "Now." She hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. The tiny tremor in her fingers said everything. Sarah stood still, every muscle tight, the tray pressed against her hip like a shield. Then Victoria smiled again, wide and brittle. "You're really going to believe some waitress over me," she hissed. "This is pathetic, David." The billionaire didn't answer. He just extended his hand, palm up. The authority in the gesture was quiet, absolute. When she finally placed the phone in his hand, her nails scraped his skin. He unlocked it easily. Of course he knew her passcode. The message thread on the screen glowed bright in the dim light. "He has no idea," followed by a heart emoji. Then another line. "2 more weeks and we move the money." The silence that followed was so deep the sound of rain seemed deafening. David set the phone down carefully beside his untouched wine glass. "We'll talk later," he said, voice clipped. Then he looked at Sarah. "Thank you." That single word cut through the tension like lightning. Victoria's face drained of color. "You don't understand, she's lying," she shouted, pushing her chair back so hard it screeched. Wine splashed across the white tablecloth like blood. Cameras from nearby diners glinted. "You'll regret this," she spat. "Both of you." David stood, his composure frighteningly controlled. "Security will escort you out," he said evenly. "Now." She slammed her purse against the table and stormed out, heels echoing through the marble floor. When she was gone, the room exhaled. A murmur swept through the diners like a gust of air after a storm. Sarah couldn't move. Her hands shook so violently she had to set the tray down before it slipped. The manager appeared moments later, face pale with panic. "Sarah, my office." "Now." The office smelled like coffee and paperwork. Mr. Peterson shut the door hard enough to rattle the glass frame. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Sarah stared at the floor. "I told him the truth." He rubbed his forehead. "You told off one of the wealthiest men in Chicago in front of half the city's elite. Do you think this place can survive if he files a complaint?" "He won't," she said softly. "He thanked me." Peterson froze, disbelief flickering across his face. "He what?" He thanked me, she repeated. And she, Victoria, lost control. Everyone saw it. He sighed, deflated. Go home, Sarah. I'll figure out what to tell corporate. That night, Sarah walked through the rain without an umbrella. The streets shimmered under the streetlights, puddles reflecting the glitter of a world that always seemed just out of reach. Her shoes soaked through. She thought about her rent, about her mother back in Milwaukee, about the $7 left in her account. By the time she reached her apartment, she was shaking from exhaustion. The ceiling leaked again. The heater groaned. She sat on the couch in her wet uniform, replaying the night over and over. Maybe she had destroyed her life. Maybe she had just made the biggest mistake she'd ever make. Then came the knock. The next morning, the world felt gray until she opened the door to a man in a black uniform holding a small envelope. Delivery for Ms. Sarah Williams, he said. The envelope was heavy, matte black, her name written in gold. Inside was a single card and a note. You saw what everyone else ignored. That kind of honesty is rare. Dinner tonight. 7 o'clock. David Harrison. Sarah read the words 3 times, certain it was a mistake. But at 7, a sleek car waited outside her building. The driver knew her name. The restaurant they drove to was brighter, higher, quieter. An entirely different world. David stood by the window when she entered, the skyline stretching behind him like a promise. Sit, he said gently. She sat. Her hands trembled as she spoke. Mr. Harrison, I didn't mean to cause trouble last night. I just couldn't. You did the right thing, he interrupted. His voice was steady, but his eyes were sharp with something else. Pain, maybe, or relief. Victoria wasn't just cheating. She was stealing. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, fake contractor invoices, photographs. Millions gone, he said. If you hadn't spoken, I might never have known. Sarah's breath caught. She was taking your money. And my trust, he said quietly. But I have enough of both to make this right. He leaned back. I owe you a debt I can't repay with words. So here's what I can offer: a job. Personal assistant. Full benefits. $200,000 a year. Sarah's eyes widened. I can't accept that. You can, he said, smiling for the first time. Because you earned it. The months that followed changed everything. Sarah moved into a small apartment with real heat, bought her mother a new washing machine, and learned to breathe without counting every dollar. In David's company, she was quiet but observant. Her years in service had trained her to notice details others ignored. Tone, hesitation, hidden motives. And in boardrooms full of polished executives, David began to rely on her instincts. Who do you trust here? He'd ask during meetings. She'd answer without hesitation. The one who listens more than he speaks. He'd smile. That's why you're here. They grew closer. Long hours blurred into conversations about life, family, and loneliness. He told her about his mother cleaning houses after his father died. She told him about her own, working double shifts at a diner just to keep the lights on. One evening, David said quietly, "You remind me of her, strong and honest. My mother would have liked you." Sarah smiled, the kind of smile that comes from being seen. But the world doesn't let change happen without testing it. One morning, as Sarah arrived at the office, reporters crowded the lobby. A headline blared across the news. Socialite Victoria Sterling arrested for fraud. The photos showed her in handcuffs, eyes wide with disbelief. A chill swept through Sarah. People whispered her name, some in admiration, others in envy. That night, she stood by her apartment window, watching snow fall under the city lights, realizing that truth has a strange kind of echo. At work, David faced his board of directors, some furious, some nervous. "We'll rebuild," he said simply. "Integrity first, profit second." And when he said it, his eyes flicked toward Sarah. Weeks later, she found herself in his office after everyone had gone home. The city glowed outside, amber and blue. David stood by the glass wall, silent. "You okay?" she asked softly. He turned. I keep thinking about that night, he said. About how one sentence changed everything. She took a hesitant step forward. Sometimes it takes one person doing the right thing. He smiled faintly. Sometimes it takes one person willing to risk everything. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was charged, full of something unspoken but real. Then he said it simply. Sarah, I care about you. The words hung in the air. She could have looked away, could have retreated behind professionalism, but she didn't. I care about you too, she said quietly. They stood there as the city pulsed below. Two lives that had once existed in separate worlds now intersecting because one woman refused to stay silent. Months later, a letter arrived at David's office. A formal notice of sentencing. Victoria Sterling. 10 years in federal prison. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement. Her accomplice, Richard Cole, 12 years. The stolen millions recovered. David read the words without satisfaction. Justice, he said softly. Nothing more. Sarah looked at him. It's something, she replied. He nodded. It's everything. The company flourished again. This time built on values people could trust. Sarah became more than an assistant. She was a partner in strategy, respected and admired. People listened when she spoke. One late evening, standing on the office balcony, she looked down at the glittering streets. Somewhere out there, a younger version of herself was still serving tables, still invisible to the world. Sarah whispered into the cold night air. Don't give up. Your moment's coming. David joined her quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. You know, he said with a smile, I still owe you dinner. She laughed softly. You already gave me a life. He looked at her then, not like an employer, but like a man who'd finally found something real in a world of illusions. Maybe it's both, he said. They stood together in the quiet hum of the city, lights glinting like 1,000 second chances. Down the street, on the news ticker, the story scrolled again. Whistleblower Waitress exposes multimillion-dollar fraud. But this time, the name beside the headline wasn't one of scandal. It was one of courage. Sarah Williams. And somewhere between justice and redemption, her voice echoed louder than money, fame, or fear. Because one act of honesty, spoken in a trembling whisper, had rewritten everything. And for Victoria Sterling, the woman who believed she'd never face consequences, her empire of lies had finally collapsed. Her last words to the press, captured as cameras flashed, were bitter and hollow. She ruined me. But everyone watching knew the truth. No, Sarah didn't ruin her. Her own greed did. Months later, Sarah stood once again by the same window where her story had changed. The city stretched out before her, bright, alive, no longer unreachable. She had walked into the golden rose invisible, but she would never be invisible again. The world hadn't grown softer, but she had grown stronger. She'd learned that truth doesn't always shout. It sometimes whispers through one small act of courage. And sometimes that's enough to move an entire life forward. At the company, her name had become a quiet legend, a reminder that honesty still had power in a world obsessed with appearances. Yet for Sarah it was simpler than that. She didn't see herself as a hero. She just couldn't stay silent when silence meant surrender. As snow began to fall, she thought of her mother back in Milwaukee, finally resting without worry. She thought of the man who believed in her when the world didn't. And she smiled, knowing that the choices we make in fear can still lead us toward light. Because every act of truth leaves a mark, on others and on ourselves. If Sarah's story moved you, share it with someone who needs courage today. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales, where every story reminds us that integrity isn't weakness, it's power.